The night was cold and the wind passed through the cracks of the broken wooden walls. A young woman named Clara sat on the dusty floor, her arms wrapped around her knees. She had been left in that deserted place for days, maybe even weeks. Time had become a blur. She didn't know how she had ended up there or why she had been abandoned. All she knew was that she wanted to get out. Every sound outside made her heart race. Sometimes she thought someone was coming to help her, but it was only the wind pushing the door slightly open before slamming it again. Her throat ached from thirst and her stomach felt empty. The only thing keeping her alive was a faint hope that somebody, somewhere, might still care enough to find her. Clara had once been full of life. She grew up near the edge of a small town, where she loved the sound of church bells on Sunday mornings and the laughter of children playing in the fields. But her life had changed the day she trusted the wrong people. They had promised her work, food, and safety. She had believed them because she wanted a new beginning. Instead, they brought her far away and left her in a place where no one could hear her cry for help. Every morning she tried to remember her mother's face. That image kept her sane. Her mother used to say, "Even the darkest night ends with the sunrise." Clara whispered that line to herself again and again. Sometimes when she was too tired to think, she would whisper, "Hold me, use me, just get me out of here," but not to anyone in particular, but to life itself. She wanted to feel human again, to feel warmth and safety. One afternoon she heard something unusual, the sound of hooves on the dry ground. At first she thought she was imagining it, but the sound grew louder. Then came footsteps. Clara's heart pounded. She crawled toward the door, too weak to stand. Her voice trembled as she called out softly, "Is someone there?" The door creaked open and sunlight flooded the room. A tall man stood there, his hat pulled low over his brow. He looked like someone who had been searching for something, or someone, for a long time. His name was Daniel, a ranch hand from the nearby valley. He had come to the old cabin to find his missing horse, but instead found Clara lying on the floor. He froze, shocked at the sight of her. She looked fragile, her face pale and her lips dry, but her eyes still had a spark of life. Daniel stepped closer and knelt beside her. "Hey," he said gently, "you're safe now. Can you hear me?" Clara blinked, unsure if he was real. She whispered, "Don't leave me here." Her voice cracked. Daniel nodded. "I won't." He pulled a small water flask from his bag and helped her take a few sips. She coughed, then sighed in relief. Tears rolled down her cheeks, and not from pain this time, but from the feeling of being seen again. He asked softly, "How long have you been here?" She shook her head. "I don't know. Too long." Her voice was weak, almost fading with each word. Daniel looked around the place. Empty shelves, broken floorboards, no signs of life. Whoever had been here before had left without care. He felt a strange mix of anger and sadness, but pushed it aside. What mattered now was helping her stand again. He placed his coat around her shoulders and lifted her gently. Clara winced from weakness but didn't resist. As he guided her out of the cabin, the sunlight hit her face for the first time in days. She closed her eyes and let the warmth touch her skin. She almost smiled. Outside, the land stretched far and silent. The horizon was wide and lonely, but it felt freer than the four walls she had just left behind. Daniel helped her sit by a rock and gave her more water. "Where are you from?" he asked quietly. Clara looked at the sky, trying to remember. "South of here. Near the river," she whispered. "My mother's house was there, but it's gone now." Daniel could tell she had been through more than she could say. He didn't ask further questions. He only said, "You don't have to talk. Just breathe. You're safe for now." She nodded slowly. It had been a long time since anyone had spoken to her like that, gently, without demand. The sound of his calm voice felt like a bridge between despair and hope. As evening came, Daniel helped her to his horse and carefully lifted her onto it. He walked beside the animal, guiding it back toward his ranch. The road was long and dusty, but the stars were beginning to appear. Clara leaned forward, her head resting on the horse's neck. She was exhausted, but for the first time she wasn't afraid of closing her eyes. When they reached the ranch, Daniel's dog barked and ran in circles, excited to see someone new. He smiled faintly. "Easy, boy," he said. He took Clara inside, helped her sit near the fire, and gave her a bowl of warm soup. She held the bowl with trembling hands and took small sips. The warmth spread through her body. She whispered a soft thank you. Daniel didn't ask who she was or what had happened. He could see the story written on her face beyond the loss, the hunger, the quiet strength. He only said, "You can stay here as long as you need." Clara looked at him through tired eyes. "Why are you helping me?" He thought for a moment before answering. "Because no one deserves to be left behind." The fire crackled, filling the silence. Outside, the wind had calmed and the stars shone brighter than before. Clara leaned back against the wall, feeling warmth in her bones for the first time in what felt like forever. Daniel sat nearby, keeping watch. He didn't know who she was or what pain had brought her here, but he knew one thing. He couldn't let her face the world alone again. As the flames flickered, Clara's eyes grew heavy. Her voice, barely above a whisper, broke the quiet. "Promise me you won't leave me here." Daniel looked at her and said softly, "I promise." For the first time since her nightmare began, she believed those words. Sleep finally came, gentle and deep. The nightmare was not over, but hope had quietly returned, carried by the kindness of a stranger who stopped to listen to a whisper in the dark. When Clara opened her eyes the next morning, she didn't recognize the room. The soft smell of bread and wood smoke filled the air. Sunlight came through a small window and fell across a handmade quilt covering her. For a moment she didn't move, afraid it might all be a dream. But then she heard the sound of a kettle whistling, and a man humming quietly to himself. Daniel stood near the stove, pouring hot water into 2 cups. When he noticed she was awake, he smiled gently. "Good morning. You slept almost a whole day," he said. Clara tried to sit up but felt dizzy. Daniel quickly moved closer and placed a pillow behind her back. "Easy there," he said. "You need to rest. You've been through more than most can handle." She nodded and whispered, "Thank you for helping me." Her voice was still soft, but it carried more life than before. Daniel handed her a cup of tea. "Drink slowly. It'll warm you." As she sipped, the warmth spread through her chest, and for the first time in weeks she didn't feel empty. Her eyes traveled around the room, the shelves filled with books and old pictures, the smell of fresh bread cooling on the counter, and a coat hanging by the door. It felt like a home, something she thought she would never feel again. Daniel watched her quietly. "I can make some porridge if you're hungry," he said. Her lips curved into a small smile. "I can help," she replied. He shook his head kindly. "Not today, you rest. Tomorrow maybe." She didn't argue. Deep down she was touched by his patience. Most people she had met before had always wanted something from her. But this man asked for nothing. Over the next few days, Clara's strength began to return. Each morning, Daniel would bring her breakfast and tell her stories about the ranch, about the stubborn horse that wouldn't listen, or the time he got lost during a storm. His stories made her laugh, sometimes softly, sometimes enough to surprise herself. At night, when the sky turned dark and the stars filled the valley, they would sit near the fire. Daniel would play an old harmonica, and Clara would listen quietly, feeling her heart slowly open to peace again. One evening, as she sat by the window watching the sunset, Clara said quietly, "I used to dream about places like this. Peaceful places. I thought they didn't exist anymore." Daniel looked at her. "They do," he said. "You just have to hold on long enough to find them." She looked down, her fingers tracing the edge of her blanket. "I almost gave up," she whispered. But something inside kept saying, "Maybe tomorrow will be better." "That's what I tell myself too," Daniel replied softly. As the days passed, Clara began helping around the ranch. She fed the chickens, helped wash dishes, and even started cooking again. Her hands, once trembling from weakness, grew steady. Her laughter returned, light and shy at first, then genuine. Daniel noticed the change but never said much. He just smiled quietly every time he saw her humming to herself while sweeping the porch. One afternoon, while cleaning, Clara found an old photograph on the shelf, a woman with kind eyes standing next to Daniel. She paused and asked, "Who is she?" Daniel's smile faded slightly, but his tone remained gentle. "My wife," he said. "She passed away a few years ago." Clara felt a soft ache in her heart. "I'm sorry," she said. He nodded. "Thank you." She was a good soul. The house felt empty after she left. Until now, Clara didn't know what to say. She looked at him, and in his quiet expression she saw a loneliness that mirrored her own. Both had lost something they could never fully replace. Yet somehow in their shared silence they found comfort. One morning Daniel asked, "Do you remember where your home was?" "Maybe someone is looking for you." Clara hesitated. She looked toward the open fields, her eyes distant. "Maybe," she said softly. "But even if they were, I don't know if I can go back. Some places hurt too much to return to." Daniel understood. He didn't press further. "Then stay here as long as you need. No one will bother you." Days turned into weeks. Clara's cheeks began to show color again. She smiled more often and her voice no longer trembled. But sometimes when the night grew too quiet, memories would sneak in. She would wake up suddenly, her heart racing, afraid she was still trapped in that old cabin. Daniel would hear her and quietly light a lamp. He would sit nearby without speaking until she calmed down. His presence alone was enough. One night, as the fire burned low, she said, "You saved me. You could have walked away that day." Daniel smiled faintly. "Maybe you saved me too." This house had been too quiet for too long. She didn't reply, but her eyes filled with tears. Not of pain this time, but of gratitude. A month later, a letter arrived at the ranch. It was from the sheriff's office of a nearby town. They had heard rumors of a young woman found in the hills, and they wanted to know if she was safe. Daniel read the letter aloud to Clara. She sat in silence for a long time, staring at the floor. Finally, she said, "So, they know?" He folded the letter. "You don't have to go if you're not ready," he said. Clara shook her head slowly. "I think I should. Not because I want to go back, but because I need to say goodbye properly this time." Daniel nodded. "Then I'll take you there." The next morning, they rode together into town. The journey was quiet, filled with the sounds of wind and hooves. When they reached the edge of town, Clara's hands trembled slightly, but she held her head high. People turned to look at her, not with judgment, but curiosity and kindness. She spoke with the sheriff, who assured her that everything was safe now. He offered her a place to stay and help if she needed it. Clara thanked him, but said she already had someone looking out for her. Before they left, she stood for a long moment looking at the river nearby. She whispered softly, "Goodbye," as if letting go of all the pain that had once held her captive. On the ride back, the air felt lighter. Daniel glanced at her and saw peace in her eyes. "Feels better?" he asked. She nodded. "Like I finally closed a door that needed closing." When they reached the ranch, Clara looked around at the quiet hills, the horses grazing, the setting sun painting everything gold. "This place saved me," she said. Daniel smiled. "No," he replied. "You saved yourself. I just gave you a place to rest." She smiled too, softly, with tears in her eyes. "Maybe," she said. "But I'll never forget the man who stopped to listen when I whispered for help." That night, they sat again by the fire. The same stars hung above, bright and endless. Clara leaned back, feeling warmth inside her that she hadn't known in a long time. The world outside was still wide and uncertain, but for the first time, she wasn't afraid of it anymore. Her voice came out calm and sure as she said, "I think I'm ready to live again." Daniel nodded slowly, watching the firelight dance across her face. "Then that's what we'll do, one sunrise at a time." And as the flames flickered and the wind whispered gently through the trees, it felt as if life itself was giving her a second chance. Not because of miracles, but because someone had cared enough to stop, to listen, and to believe that even the most broken hearts can find their way home again.